Hi, friends. I hope that you guys are having a great day today. This is the first live stream of 2019 for my weekly series discussing peace and conflict studies. It is super exciting. I personally love this series. It's one of the highlights of my week. And I am super excited that you guys could make it. Now I'm going to dive into the usual greeting for those of you who've never been here before, because lots of members of the fam squad are new. Hey, logical listeners, I hope that you guys are having an absolutely wonderful day, and today we're going to be talking about conflict plans. We're not going to be talking about them super in-depth or anything. We're mostly just going to be chatting about them and introducing them to people because it is an unusual topic, and it's a topic that is pretty important in peace and conflict studies, especially in corporate conflict management, and it's just a really neat thing for people to know about. I want to dive right in because today isn't going to be a super deep dive. It's mostly just going to be an exploration of this topic, and it's going to be laying the groundwork for a more specific video and a more specific live stream that talks about conflict management plans in depth. For those of you who can already sort of picture what a conflict management plan looks like, that's great. I'm going to ask that you keep that vision in mind, and I'm going to see how it squares up to what I say today and to what I say next week, because next week's topic is going to be an in-depth conversation about conflict management plans. If you have never heard the term before, it is basically an organized plan that incorporates and details how it is that an organization, a family, or a community will respond to an internal conflict. And they can definitely be appropriated to respond to external conflicts as well. That's entirely possible, especially if the plan is written well and if it's written intelligently. But for a lot of people and for a lot of organizations, conflict management plans generally deal with stuff on the inside. And just so you know, in case you're wondering why it is that there is a whiteboard that's fallen on Friday after my live stream last week where I talked about the government shutdown, the board was put up, but then it fell, which really sucks. And it is quite unfortunate that it fell. I really like it. I want to use it in videos. But boy, for the life of me, it will not stay up. It is really frustrating. And believe me, I am distracted by it. So if there's ever a moment where I take a moment to take a break and just look at that, that's why. But yeah, a conflict management plan is basically a detailed outline of what it is that an organization, a community, or family should do in cases of conflict. There's lots of stuff that a conflict management plan could have inside of it. Some of the stuff includes links to valuable resources, not just textbooks and stuff, but also actual people, such as if you are an organization department, and also oftentimes information about connecting with conflict clinics, which is what I want to open up. A conflict clinic, if you've never heard the term before, is just an organization that handles conflict mediation. And generally, these organizations either do nonprofit work or they work for corporate entities. I want to open up one that does both because I very much like the idea of being a member of such an organization and eventually working with people and working with corporations, so that way I can make money off of those sorts of contacts and doing nonprofit work and work for free for communities and for specific individuals and their smaller organizations. I think it's important that people balance out doing larger corporate HR work and also doing smaller organizational stuff. But that is one of my end-all be-all goals, along there with write the script for a TV show or a movie and run for office one day. So that's one of them. That's one of them big goals up there. It's not one of my little goals that I am working on steadily every single day. And for future reference, if you are interested in sorts of conflict plans and stuff, in the next couple of days, I'm going to create and share a resource that helps people create their own sorts of these plans. They're definitely unusual, and it's something that's unintuitive for a whole lot of people, but it's also something that's definitely worth doing. Conflict management plans are very unusual because they are things that like you would think people would have and people would have already written out, but oftentimes it's difficult for people to take a step back and for them to write up plans. In a lot of cases, people who write up conflict management plans are actually outside hires, people who have the ability to see and analyze everything objectively without letting their feelings about an organization or an organizational manner blind them to the reality environment. And one of the things that I eventually want to do is I want to work with small upcoming businesses, and I want to help them get structures in place that enable them to handle conflict productively instead of being forced to build responses to conflicts as they emerge. In the past, I have talked about the importance of creating atmospheres and cultures of trust. That's a topic that I'm going to revisit a couple of times over the course of the next couple of months and dive into super deep specifics, but creating an atmosphere of trust is definitely a conflict management plan. And it's actually because I think that if you create an atmosphere of trust, you not only mitigate the likelihood of a serious conflict emerging, you also make it possible to more easily transform conflicts that are negative and destructive into conflicts that are positive and productive. Because as I pointed out in the past, remember, someone who studies peace and conflict studies doesn't necessarily think of conflict as a negative thing. They think of violence as a negative thing. And violence is one possible symptom or consequence of conflict, but it's not the only one. And it's also definitely not the only one that's likely. It's entirely possible that businesses can build organizational and cultural structures within themselves that enable them to have positive outcomes and positive views on conflict, wherein conflict creates a culture and a sense of elevated communication. And it's definitely a stressor. Conflict is definitely something that stresses relationships, and it's definitely something that creates tension. But both tension and stress do not have to result in negative things themselves. And that's worth considering, it's worth looking at, and it's worth keeping in mind when you are thinking about the business that you want to own or the sort of place that you want to work with. And one of the reasons why I want to talk about conflict management plans in today's video is that even if you are not an entrepreneur yourself, if you're someone who values the organization that you work for, whether it is something that you volunteer your time for, or it's a place that you actually work for and you get paid for your labor and you get paid for your time and compensated monetarily, then it's definitely worth considering looking into whether or not there's a conflict management plan in place, and if not, building one yourself. And remember that you don't have to build a perfect one. That's something that's really important. Even trying to build a conflict management plan shows initiative, it shows professionalism, and it shows energy. And that's something that a lot of people would get really excited for. It's something that a lot of managers and a lot of supervisors would look at and be like, hey, I like your spirit, I like your gutso, and I'm really excited that we're here and that you're contributing this energy. This plan isn't perfect. There are things that we can work on together that would make it better. But also, even if a conflict management plan already exists, there are lots of places that have inadequate conflict management plan. A problem in some schools in the United States, for instance, is that their conflict management plans in cases of things like sexual harassment in the workplace recall and require that there is a face-to-face arbitration. And that's a serious problem because both men and women who have been sexually harassed or worse in the workplace oftentimes reasonably don't feel comfortable coming forward and having a face-to-face conversation with the person that they said did this to them and with the person who did it to them. And that's perfectly reasonable. It's something that people need to be aware of. And part of the importance of looking at conflict management plans and trying to refine them, trying to improve them, is looking for glaring issues like that. That's actually a problem that I have friends who've had to deal with, because people that I know have worked as teachers and substitute teachers, and they faced harassment from their colleagues. And it's a serious problem when a place like a school has such a faulty arbitration and conflict management system and conflict management plan. That's part of the reason why it's important that people who are from the outside, who can objectively identify issues like this, come in and look at these plans and make serious comments and serious suggestions. Fortunately, not every school is like this, but there are a glaring number that are, and it's a serious problem. I know that some places aren't public with their conflict management plans, which makes a lot of sense, but even that can be a problem, because if someone is experiencing harassment, or if someone is, for whatever reason, in a state of conflict with someone else, it really does help them to know what sort of steps they're able to take and what sort of steps they're expected to take if they want to have the school's backing or whatever place they're at's backing when they're trying to handle conflict mediation. I'm also going to stop and check for comments every once in a while. Hey, Purple Rhymes with Orange, super glad that you're here. Today's chat was definitely not advertised as much as possible, so it's entirely possible to just be you and I. Hopefully some other folks will come in. Super excited for familiar faces. I'm really liking today's topic. I wish that I had the time to give it the proper level of research and to be able to do the super deep dive. But yeah, today we're just talking about conflict plans, and in a few minutes we're going to start talking about justice topics. But yeah, so conflict plans are a really important step in both building organizational structures and also in just recognizing and improving cultures in the workplace and atmospheres in the workplace. These are things that I want to specialize in. These are things that I want to help both new businesses and seasoned businesses with, because this is a critically important thing. And it's vitally important that not just people at the top, not just executives and not just supervisors be aware of this, but also employees at all levels. And yes, oftentimes consumers who take advantage or otherwise use services and goods produced by businesses. Because if you're able to understand how it is that a workplace structures and handles conflicts, then you're able to gain a better understanding of how it is that they view not only their own time, but also the time and labor of their employees. Having a positive and refined and serious conflict management plan not only reduces conflicts, it can also build trust, not just between people who are working in the place, but also by people who are in the community and who are going over to the business, to the corporation, to the place that provides a service. And that's really important, because having a good conflict management plan can also be a good part of an effective PR strategy. If you are in an environment where lots of businesses are having issues with harassment and issues with, and you can honestly say, hey, we have a refined conflict management plan. And that's because we value the time and energy, not only of our employees, but also the people who come and use our services, the people who come and consume the goods that we produce. We value everyone's time, and we want to make it so that there's a culture and atmosphere of safety and trust. And that even if people get into conflicts, we're not afraid of that. That's not a thing that we're worried is going to result in a lawsuit. It's just an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to learn what it is that our employees think, what it is that our consumers think, and also how we can better create atmospheres of trust, atmospheres of respect. And these are all things that are actually really important for businesses. It's easy to say that this is pie in the sky sort of thinking, but it's not. Because if a business feels safe, if a business is secure, it's able to have a plan like this. And then they're able to recognize that though conflicts can be bad, they can be negative and destructive, they're less likely to be negative and destructive in the place that we and in the businesses and goods that we assist and that we distribute. I think it's really important that people recognize the importance of having a conflict management plan, not just in business, not just in capital, and not just in production, but also in communities, because in communities, conflicts can be just as negative, they can be just as stressful, but they can also provide opportunities for growth. And it's really important that we recognize the positivity of the conflict. And if someone's going to write up a conflict management plan, no matter what setting they're writing it for, whether they are trying to be like, hey, we're in a business, we want to make sure that conflicts don't affect the bottom line, and also that they don't create an atmosphere of hostility in the workplace. Or you're in a community where it's like, hey, we all have to live together, we should try to work together to the best of our abilities, and we should do our best to be positive and productive, and just to be helpful to each other. These are admittedly very different settings, but conflict goals can be the same. Conflict goals can be similar. And conflict management responses are also in many cases similar. Just because a community is not a business doesn't mean that there aren't things that they create. It doesn't mean that there aren't goods that they produce and services that they provide. So in a lot of ways, it's entirely possible to model a conflict management plan similarly. And if you have a conflict management plan for any sort of setting, for any sort of context, you can definitely look at it and you can consider how it is that it's going to affect any future plans that you want to develop and any future responses that you're going to make to conflicts, whether or not you're aware of them right now. And I would argue that it's probably easier to create a conflict management plan for a business than it might be for a community, because businesses are closed settings. And oftentimes in communities, you have a harder time picking and choosing the people who make up your communities. But in businesses, at the very least internally, it's entirely possible for you to control the environment that you're in. And it's easier for you to buy the workplace. But that doesn't mean that conflict management plans for communities should be avoided, because they absolutely shouldn't be. I would argue, if anything, they're probably more important than they are for businesses, because it's harder to create them, and because conflicts in businesses are different from conflicts in communities. Oftentimes, conflicts in communities have the potential to explode outward at a rate that's much higher and much faster than conflicts in businesses. And I sure hope I got that order right and didn't just repeat businesses twice. But if I did, someone will undoubtedly let me know. Just so you know, I meant that businesses were smaller, more contained, and they were less likely to explode. These conflicts have the potential to balloon, and they have the power to affect a lot of people and their families really fast. And that's not to say that one sort of conflict is more important or more potentially dangerous than the other, because a conflict in a business can definitely affect a whole lot of people, including people who aren't part of the business, really easily. So I'm not going to be over here lying to you guys. I wouldn't do that. But I am saying that there's definitely a difference in priority, and there's definitely a difference in atmosphere and in reach if we're talking about conflicts in business settings and conflicts in community settings. And I'm sure there are peace and conflict studies folks out there who have a very different opinion on this than I do. I sure would love to chat with them in the future. I think that's really important, that there are lots of different perspectives on these sorts of things. But if you're going to create a conflict plan, I'm going to ask that you think about some of the following stuff. I'm about to switch topics, just so you know, but I guess if anything, this is the little homework that you have for today's live stream. That was a suggestion that I got, that I should start giving people things to think about for future discussions. And if you're going to start thinking about this, if you're going to want to try to plan your own conflict management plan for your family, for your community, or for your business, here's some of the stuff you can immediately think about. What are resources that people in the setting have access to that they should feel safe reaching out to? So if you're in a business setting, this is stuff like, what are the HR people? Who are people that are likely to listen to what you've got to say objectively, who may or may not be in positions of power, but are just people that you feel comfortable with approaching, who you know will listen to your concerns and take them with the seriousness that they deserve? What are the existing protocols for conflict? And also, what objectives do you have in creating this plan? And this last one's really important, because different types of conflicts can have different consequences, and different types of conflicts can have different negative or positive ones as well. Because a conflict in the workplace doesn't necessarily have the same sense of urgency and the same level of potential danger as a conflict in the community, but a conflict in the business can have far more immediate consequences, and oftentimes it can be resolved, or at least it can be temporarily pushed aside a lot more easily, because it's difficult to say that conflicts have been resolved in meaningful ways, especially if you're trying to say that it's possible to do that quickly. That's part of the reason why there are people in peace and conflict circles who say that people who do conflict work are not conflict resolvers. They're conflict mediators, they're conflict transformers, but they're not conflict resolvers. And that's one of the things that I'm going to start to do more of in future live streams. I'm going to start to incorporate more rhetoric from my field and more language, and I'm also going to start explaining it more, because I think it's an important thing that people deserve to be aware of, because the way that people in my field talk about things like conflict and peace is different than people on the outside do. And that's definitely perspectives worth considering. So just remember, what are resources in your circles and in the context of the conflict plan that you're creating that people should feel safe accessing, such as in a workplace, HR, management, and also coworkers of the same level who are likely to listen and take the concerns of the parties seriously? What are existing protocols? And also, what are conflict objectives? There was one more, but it's slipping my mind. What are the objectives of the resolution plan, of the conflict management plan, all of that stuff. So now, going forward, I want to talk just a little bit about, let's see. No, I'm roboting again? Damn. That sucks. I hope that I stopped roboting. I wasn't looking at the comments. I also didn't take notes for today's live stream. I'm doing it mostly off the cuff. I looked up sources just to make sure the stuff that I was saying was making sense, stuff like that. But yeah. So the next topic that I wanted to talk about just a little bit is justice stuff. In the future, I'm going to be talking more of the fix, and I'm going to be, oh, tight. Thank you for keeping track, Purple Rhymes with Orange. I to the stream, which would be extremely distracting. It would be really difficult for me to tell when I was roboting. Oh no, I'm roboting again. Damn. But yeah, so some of the next stuff that I want to talk about is I want to talk about specific conflicts in the future. That's one of the things that I'm going to try to do. I'm thinking of trying to push my Patreon more substantially, and one of the things that I want to do while pushing my Patreon more substantially is start offering services. And one of the services I want to offer are reports on specific conflicts, and I think that's something that a lot of people would be interested in. I also know that that's something that there are definitely podcasts that could take advantage of. There are podcasts that cover current events and stuff. And I found out over the course of the last couple of months that the way I write about things, the way I talk about things, is not always super approachable, but it's often pretty approachable. So that's good. That means that I have a way of writing that's logical and makes sense to a lot of people. And that's super exciting. I'm thinking of trying to talk about like specific conflicts as they're occurring. That's one of the things I want to do with my newsletter, which for those of you who don't know is one of the services I offer on Patreon. It's something that there is currently a free sample of on January 15th. So next Tuesday, there's going to be another free sample that's substantially longer and is far more indicative of what the newsletter will actually look like. But after that, in the future, I want to talk about like specific conflicts, both on this podcast and privately. I call this podcast, it's not really a podcast, but on this live stream, which I do weekly, and on other stuff. And that's something that I really, really want to do. Rather than talk about like general humanistic stuff or atheistic stuff on this channel, I would like for it to be a resource that people could go to for a whole bunch of things, like how it is that I'm doing my Spanish series, where my next video has been filmed. I'm not entirely sure if it's going to go up tomorrow. Hopefully it will. Hey, Frustrated Atheist, good to see you. I really would like to get a more concentrated plan and plan things out more keenly. Some of the stuff that's going to be going on over the course of the next couple of days. This particular week is a little bit crazy. Tomorrow is the only day of the week that I am not live streaming. And that is very fascinating because on Friday, I'm doing my next political podcast or next political live stream. I did one on the government shutdown. I'm currently selecting topics that I'm going to be doing it on, and I'm super excited for that because people really enjoyed the government shutdown live stream where I talked about a humanistic response to the government shutdown, among other things, and I just talked about what a government shutdown is and the people that it affects. I want to keep on doing stuff like that because I really like politics. If you guys don't follow me on Twitter, I'm pretty sure most of my subscribers follow me on Twitter. But if you don't follow me on Twitter, I tweet a lot about politics. And I love politics with a very intense passion. Friday is not the normal day of the week that I'm going to be doing that particular live stream. It's just that this Friday is the only day of the week that I can, because tomorrow I'm going to be recording another video. Wednesday, Wonder Lady and I live stream. And then Thursday, Mrs. and I live stream. We're going to be talking about capitalism. And that's super exciting. I am legitimately so hyped for that live stream. But on this particular live stream, the Monday live streams that I do, I am going to be talking about issues related to peace and conflict studies. And I'm eventually going to start analyzing specific conflicts. I'm going to start talking about actual, like, example peace and conflict studies, plans and papers and stuff, including some of my own. I'm going to talk about some of the research stuff that I've done because I've done interesting research. I've read interesting research, and I think it's worth sharing with y'all so that way y'all can get a better understanding of what it is that I actually specifically research and study, because what I study right now is not probably what I'm going to be sticking with. And part of that is that my university offers a bunch of different, or concentrations, not majors. It offers a bunch of different concentrations in peace and conflict studies, all of which are objectively super worth studying. And the one that I'm studying right now is international focused, it's military focused, and it's human rights focused, which is much more macro level than I really want to do, although I really love the research and like human rights focus of it, because what I'm studying is the relationship between military and civilian groups. So I'm researching like the relationship between the Army and then like other federal agencies that are not military based, as an example. And I'm studying how it is that those groups intersect, and also oftentimes how it is that they conflict. And that's one of the most interesting things in the world. But I didn't want to study peace and conflict studies to study theory. I wanted to study peace and conflict studies because I wanted to study how to actually help people. And there are absolutely people with my specific concentration who are doing fantastic work that is objectively helping people. But I want to help people on a much more detailed level. I don't want to be studying and looking at the huge picture. I want to see how it is that intersect. Yeah, geometry. I'm totally a math kid. I know numbers. I know the best numbers. But I want to study like specific relationships, and I want to be able to help people rebuild bonds that have been shattered in the wake of conflicts. And I want to help people have a better view of conflict than they currently do. So I think it's really important that I and other people who at the very least have like my specific focus, my specific passions, study more detailed relationships, and not just like the abstract lines that connect different groups, but actually understand how it is that conflict dynamically affects communication and dynamically affects relationships. And that's stuff that's super interesting to me. If it were up to me, I'd actually get all three of the concentrations that my university offers in peace and conflict studies, because each of them is super interesting. And I want to study them all. I just want all the peace and conflict studies degrees. I actually also want to get my PhD in peace and conflict studies. And that's something that I plan on doing, but not immediately after I get my master's degree. I do not want to go back to school when I finish for a while. I want to open up my own clinic. I want to start actively working in the communities that I'm a part of and start actively helping people before I go back to school and gain more, oftentimes, theoretical knowledge. Although I've absolutely had opportunities to work with groups and to work with individuals and help them rebuild their relationships using what I've studied, because a lot of what I've studied isn't necessarily the most connected to what I've concentration, so to speak. And I absolutely think there are lots of places where the sort of like minute details that I'm interested in are really helpful. I think that purple rhymes with orange is absolutely correct. The atheistic community and the LGBT community are places where people need this. And they're far from the only places, absolutely, but they're places where just owning up to your identity and living as your authentic self causes conflict with other people. See you later, frustrated. I'm glad you could catch part of this. I hope you come back and catch the whole thing later. This is definitely a more chill stream. But yeah. So yeah, I think that there are lots of places where people being their authentic selves causes conflict. And it's a problem. And it's not that them being their authentic self is the result, is like the thing that causes the conflict, but it's that other people's identities are rooted in the oppression and the persecution of people who are different than they are. So oftentimes, a really good example of this are people who take the Bible literally on some issues, people who think that being LGBT is a sin, people who think that being an atheist means you're going to hell, people like that. They see people in our communities and they want to either change us or they want us to go back into hiding. And that's a problem, especially because we're not, and we shouldn't change our identities just because they want to change us and just because they want us to go back into hiding. And that's not to say that all theists are like this. Obviously, they're not. In fact, I would argue that at the very least in some faith communities, the majority of them aren't. And that's a wonderful thing. But it is a problem that there are so many people in these communities who have these points of view towards us. And peace and conflict studies is, in a sense, the study of how to change not necessarily those people's minds, but how to change and how to correct the injustices that have been inflicted upon our communities in the name of those people's beliefs. And that's something that is absolutely needed. It's something that is critically important. And it's something that I am happy to be studying and working on ways to change and ways to improve, because I definitely think this is necessary. Obviously, there are people who understand the importance of peace and conflict studies, even if they want to know more, even if they don't know enough specifically. And that's part of the reason why these live streams get views. Obviously, not every single one of them has a huge number of views. That's fine. That's just the way it is, a lot of this stuff. But it's absolutely worth it for me as a communicator, for me as an educator, and for me as an advocate for this field to be here having conversations like these. And in the future, I'm going to make these live streams more of a production. And by that, I don't mean like make them inauthentic or anything, but I am going to be creating material around this and hopefully getting some people who want to chat more in depth about this. I'm not going to have an after party this week, and this live stream is getting ready to end. I mostly just wanted to have a conversation with y'all rather than talk super in depth about any particular topic. But I am going to work hard, and I'm going to make this a seriously want to learn. In the future, I would like to have scholars in the field come on to this, and I would love to have them chat with me, because I honestly don't know of any other series on YouTube that explores this. And I think that's a real shame, because this is a really important field. I feel really strongly about it. I know dozens of people who feel just as passionately, if not more than, about this. And we're out here, we're wondering for opportunities to have conversations about this online and to speak to people who want to know more about our studies. And we'll realize just how powerful of a tool YouTube is, because I didn't think of using peace and conflict studies and YouTube for a while. It was only when I started to build an audience and I was like, what are things that I can cover that are uniquely in my wheelhouse, where I am my most passionate, where I am at my best? And then I realized that I really like having live streamy conversations with y'all. I think you guys are really interested in this. You guys definitely want to know more. And I was like, what if I fused this? But this isn't something, even if it sounds easy to people who have YouTube channels, this isn't something that is intuitive for a lot of people in my field. I want to have a conflict radio show one day where I talk about ongoing conflicts in the world, and I also talk about conflict resolution techniques and have conversations with people. This, if anything, is a prototype of that. And it's an opportunity for me to build my voice, for me to grow an audience, and for me to gain the skills, the passion, and the confidence more than anything else needed for me to do that concept justice. Because I think a conflict radio show would be really neat. I've done little skits with it. I'm probably going to share them later on in the year, and I'm gonna do more of them where I do just like little 30-second stuff where I talk about a conflict like in less than a minute, which obviously doesn't do the conflict justice, but it gives people information. And then it's like, hey, I hope that you go out and you research this yourself, because I think that this is an important topic, and I deliberately decided to cover it this way because I think that this would open people's minds and it would give people the knowledge needed for them to go and do research themselves. And that's something that a lot of people in my field ultimately want to do. It's an objective for a lot of us. Many of us have conversations about how it is that we can make our knowledge, our theories, our ideas, and our views more widespread. And it's difficult convincing many of the people in this field of the validity of social media and of the efforts of just things like this. So I hope that as my audience grows, more and more people come to this sort of conversation, and that ultimately we can have really neat conversations. But I'm sorry this was probably a bit less energetic than a lot of my other live streams have been. I'm going to be live streaming pretty much the rest of the week, so you guys will have lots of opportunities to see me. Tomorrow, before the end of the day, there will be a video in Spanish about atheism. And if you're curious about that, I'll mention it very briefly now. I really, 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 really want to create content in Spanish. Spanish is my first language. It's my preferred language, even though I am way better at speaking in English than I am at Spanish. And I ultimately believe that there is a need for content created by atheists that speak Spanish that focus on things like atheism, secularism, and humanism and make them approachable. And there are people out there who are creating that content, but there's a need for more of it. And I want to create that content. I'm nervous about it because anyone who speaks Spanish fluently will definitely look at you, even if you don't know a single lick of Spanish, and be like, yeah, his Spanish is weird, it's imperfect. But also, people are really liking that sort of content. My video where I did the first full video in Spanish got a lot of not a lot of comments, got a lot of likes. There's obviously an audience out there that's ready and eager for this sort of content. Super excited for it, because I do want to create material that helps Spanish-speaking and Hispanic atheists out there and gives them the motivation and the energy and also the resources, because that's one of the things I want to talk about. I want to talk about specific organizations, reveal what they provide, and talk about the advantages of joining them, working with them, and reading what it is that they create. And this is stuff that I don't know any Spanish-speaking atheists, at the very least with a YouTube channel, who's out here doing this. And I think that sucks. But I think that I also have an advantage here because I'm someone who very much likes organizing stuff. I'm very much someone, like, I don't like organizing like physical things, but I like organizing events. I like creating resources. And y'all can tell if you guys check my website, if you guys watch my YouTube channel, a lot of my stuff is educational. A lot of my stuff is like super serious, super formal content. And I like that. That's the sort of thing that I enjoy creating. So I'm happy to be out here doing this. I am really excited for the next year. I'm really excited to talk about justice topics, which is something that I do want to dive just a little bit into for maybe like 3 or 4 minutes. I want to talk about justice. I want to talk about how to help people obtain justice. And I want to talk about what justice reform will ultimately look like, because justice reform is of critical importance. And it's dynamic, it's needed. And also it's confusing because what justice reform means to a lot of people. And when I talk about justice topics, I probably will do things in a different style than this. I probably will have like a panel of folks, and we probably will have like a roundtable chat about justice reforms and all of that. And that's stuff that people want to talk about. And it's stuff that I'm excited to be out here trying to create. And as my audience grows, as I gain access to more resources and as I gain more knowledge, hopefully the quality of that sort of content will increase. And also, there's something else. Oh, before I go, I know people are curious. I've gotten questions about this. I am still planning the religious private school live stream chat, because that is absolutely a thing that people need to talk about, people need to hear about. I've been thinking about how to do it, and I'm not sure if the best way to do it is to have one big live stream or to interview people who went to private schools and either publish those interviews or have them in a YouTube channel like this where we just live stream and we talk about our experiences. Because I went to a religious private school, and it wasn't the worst school I've ever been to, but it had a very negative impact on my views. And those views not only hurt myself, they also hurt other people. And it's important that there are atheists who are out here talking about this, and not only talking about their own experiences, because that's something that I've noticed in the context uniquely of religious private schools. A lot of people only talk about their own experiences. I could be wrong about this, and if I am, please call me out, please let me know. But a lot of the conversations I've seen atheists create, even in like roundtable discussions, have been focused on their own experiences and have not been focused on giving people opportunities to share what they learned and also how they unlearned it, because I think that's critically important. So what I want to do, I want to workshop this idea because I think the idea of it is important. I think it's good to work on refining it before I can do something serious. And so I'm putting that idea temporarily on hold, but it's still a thing that I want to do. I especially want to do it in Spanish because I know of no person who has talked about religious private schools in Spanish, regardless of whether the ones they went to were in English or not. It's just not a thing that I am aware of people have talked about. And that's something I'm hoping to change. One of the big things about what I want to do is create the sort of content that I would like to see. That's one of my big goals. It's to create fun content, educational content, and when necessary, focus on fun, and also what's more on fun than anything else. That's part of the reason I have a second channel, but that's something I'll talk about later. I'm going to sign off. I really appreciate you guys coming and hanging out with me, even if it was just for a little bit. I will see you guys before the end of tomorrow. Not entirely sure what time. I hope you guys can check out my next video. I'm working on subtitles in English for it, which is part of the reason why I wanted to wait a second. Also, I will see you guys around. And you being here, thank you so much for choosing to make me a part of your week. I will see you in my other videos and in my other live streams. Remember, Wonder Lady Wednesday, Mrs. Snarky on Thursday, and then me on Friday. Heck yeah. And also, thank you so much specifically to you two who stuck around, Mrs. and Purple. You guys, always amazing. I very much like both of you, and I hope that you both had wonderful days. So I will see you around.